Hello, my name is David Wilkinson, and it's a delight to join you on this virtual quiet day as we think about wonder and awe. My background is in theoretical astrophysics, which sounds very grand, but in fact, it's really just twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. The only trouble is that astrophysicists reply, above the world so high, a contracting ball of hot hydrogen gas undergoing nuclear fusion doesn't quite rhyme in the same way that the nursery rhyme does. But for a number of years, I studied stars and galaxies, the origin of the universe and the Big Bang, and other small questions such as that. I've been asked just for a few minutes to talk about awe and wonder as we look at the universe, which I'm entirely delighted to be doing. And inevitably, I thought I'd show you a few pictures. So let me share my screen in the time-honored way in terms of Zoom presentations. We're going to talk about science and the theology of wonder. And let me say that this sense of theology and wonder has been very important for a whole number of different parts of science. As we've thought about curiosity and we've wondered about the universe, but also about our responsibility in the universe. This is the picture from Apollo 8, Christmas Eve. And there the astronauts on Apollo 8 took this photograph of Earthrise. It became one of the most iconic photographs of the Apollo mission. And also, it is believed that it became very influential in the stirrings and the growth of those who wanted to take the environment seriously, following Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. This image, this sense of this beautiful blue planet in the vastness of space, became very important for us locating ourselves, understanding ourselves, and the fragility of the environment in the vastness of the universe. This is a special place, and therefore we needed to take care of it more and more. And so let me pick out from my own area a number of things that make me go, gosh, wonder about the universe. The first is really very, very profound, and that is the universe is big. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why have I taken some of my time to listen to someone speaking and say the universe is big? It's obvious, isn't it? Well, it is big, but just how big it is extraordinary. The successor to the Hubble Space Telescope is the James Webb Space Telescope. And here in the journal Nature is one of the first pictures that it took. You notice the headline here, Landmark Webb Telescope releases first science image. Astronomers are in awe. Well, astronomers are often in awe about things, but particularly about some of these images. And what you see here in slightly more detail is a number of galaxies. Don't worry about the shining stars in the foreground. Look at these little dots of light here. And you see some of these images here, these arcs of light. This is the distorted image of galaxies, distorted by the lens of gravity in some of the foreground galaxies, enabling us to see glimpses of galaxies some 13 billion light years away from us. So the light has taken 13 billion years to reach us from these galaxies. The light that comes from the sun, that occasionally comes to Durham Cathedral, takes about 8 minutes. The light from these galaxies has taken 13 billion years, and so we're seeing these galaxies as they were 13 billion years ago when the light started off. And galaxies are made up of stars. And this was the second photograph from the James Webb Space Telescope of a maternity hospital for stars. It will typically give birth, this great cloud of hydrogen and dust, give birth to about 10,000 stars or so, each as large as our own sun. And these new stars are lighting up the gas out of which they formed in these wonderful, colourful displays. The third picture released from James Webb was this picture, and this is strictly come dancing for galaxies. These galaxies typically containing about 100 billion stars revolving around each other in a cosmic dance orchestrated by the force of gravity. So each of these galaxies has 100 billion stars. How many galaxies are there in the universe? Well, it's of the order of 100 billion. Well, I know it's a Saturday, but how many stars are there in the universe? Very easy mathematical calculation. You multiply 100 billion by 100 billion, and the answer is a lot. Something like the grains of sand on the beaches of the world. The universe is big. Secondly, the universe is subtle, by which I mean it is both regular, predictable, and picturable, and at the same time, it's unpredictable and unpicturable. We've known a lot about the physical laws, which seem to be clear and beautiful, indeed elegant and intelligible to us. A few years ago, walking through the streets of Durham, a fellow physicist came up with tears in his eyes and he hugged me. It was the day of the discovery of gravitational waves. Physicists coming up and hugging me in the streets of Durham doesn't happen often, it has to be said. And 100 years ago, Albert Einstein said, general relativity says that the space and time of the universe are a bit like a stretchy fabric. And if you get two black holes banging into each other, then there will be little ripples in the space-time that go out across the universe. He said, this will happen, but you'll never see it. 100 years later, in this experiment, the Advanced LIGO experiment, where a laser beam is shot off in one direction and another laser beam at 90 degrees in another direction, in order to see whether one of these ripples in space-time comes through the surface of the Earth, and they saw something. They saw a distortion in space being stretched, actually a very small way, less than the diameter of a proton. But we saw it. We saw the evidence of gravitational waves from two black holes that had banged together on the other side of the universe, as predicted by Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity. And the physicist in the streets of Durham hugged me because not we were involved in this experiment in any way, but because this wonderful ability of science to see that the universe can be understood through the laws of science. And indeed, just across from the cathedral on the other side of the river, deep below the floors in the Department of Physics are some supercomputers. And these computers are set up to simulate how a universe forms. What you have to do is you've got to take a little bit of matter, gas, with a little bit of things called dark energy and dark matter, and you put them together and you let gravity do its work. And this is gravity doing its work in a simulation of how the clusters of galaxies within our universe form. You can see them here as these filaments. Don't worry about the different colors. These are different temperatures. It's color-coded. But you see gravity beginning to assemble the vast clusters of galaxies that form our universe. And this is the power of science, to understand these things and to picture them. And yet, there are other things about the universe which are far more subtle and supple, as John Polkinghorne would say. Quantum theory deals with things on the very smallest of scales, protons, electrons. And fundamental quantum theory is something about the uncertainty of the world at the very smallest of scales, summed up famously by Werner Heisenberg in his uncertainty principle, where he said, if I have an electron, I can either tell you where it is or how it's moving, but you can't know both. That's the uncertainty principle. If I know where it is, I don't know how it's moving. And if I know how it's moving, I don't know where it is. And you think to yourself, that's completely against common sense. And indeed it is. And the quantum world is, as Polkinghorne would say, a place where the tyranny of common sense is broken. I find that awe-inspiring. And just last year, a number of quantum physicists were given the Nobel Prize for something called togetherness in separation in the quantum world. Not only is it uncertain, but also particles stay connected in ways that we don't fully understand. I find that awe-inspiring, even if I don't fully understand it. The third thing that makes me wonder is something about the universe being fruitful. One of the things that we've discovered in the last couple of decades is a number of planets beyond our solar system, exoplanets. We didn't expect that there would be that many there, but we found over 5,000 of them so far. And some of them are about the size of the Earth. They're terrestrial planets. Might they harbor life? Well, inevitably, that great theological journal, the Daily Star, whenever something like this comes, talks about how we're a visited planet. We won't get into that at the moment. But the fourth picture from the James Webb Space Telescope was this picture, because we're now able to look at the atmospheres around some of these exoplanets, planets beyond our own solar system. And here it shows the presence of water in the atmosphere. And as it makes more observations, it might be that the universe has life in other places. Now, let's be careful about this. It doesn't mean intelligent life necessarily. After all, it's a long way from an amoeba to an accountant. Well, or maybe not, depending on how you view accountants. But it could be that the universe is teeming with primitive life in lots of different places. Might it have evolved into conscious, intelligent life? We don't know at the moment. That's been a cause of wonder. The fourth area doesn't fit into the wow, gosh, how beautiful type of thing, but it does questions. And that is that the universe is destined to futility. Also getting the Nobel Prize just a few years ago were these scientists who discovered that the universe is never going to contract after its Big Bang, but is going to expand forever in what's called the accelerating universe. This was a big discovery of physics. And it said that the universe is going to increase in its expansion rate. This was unexpected. And you might say, well, that's great because it'll continue forever. Well, not quite. The trouble is, as the universe expands, so it cools. And as it cools, it becomes impossible for life to continue. An end in futility. Paul Davies, a very popular science writer and cosmologist, wrote, "An almost empty universe growing steadily more cold and dark for all eternity is profoundly depressing." So a universe that makes me gasp with awe at just how big and wonderful and beautiful it is. A universe where in the laws of physics, I see predictability, but also unpredictability. A universe that's picturable and predictable, but not always. A universe which has science to it, which I don't fully understand. A universe that could be fruitful in terms of life, and a universe where the end of the universe is not a rosy, happy ever after, but actually end in futility? These are questions that modern science raise. And they're questions about our place in the universe, how central we are or not. But also, I think, questions for Christian theology, which are important for me as a Christian theologian. The sense of the vastness of the universe recalls to mind that sense that God is always much greater than I am. That sense of a universe which is based on physical laws is a reminder for me of the faithfulness of God. A universe which is a possibility of life is always about a God of extravagance, the extravagant creator of Genesis 1. That lovely phrase in Genesis 1, I think the understatement of the Bible. If you haven't noticed it, he made the greater light and the lesser light, and then the writer puts the understatement, he made the stars also. Oh, by the way, he created all of these stars. This is an extravagant creator, not a boring mathematician as such. And as a Christian theologian, it's a challenge to know that the physics of the universe is destined to futility. And of course, our own lives, in one sense, are destined to futility. That's why the bodily resurrection of Jesus in this Easter season becomes very important for me in understanding that God's purposes go beyond just the science of this universe into a new creation, of resurrection bodies, a new heaven and a new earth. And some of my friends will say, well, that's all well and good, but isn't that simply pie in the sky where you die? What gives you the ground for bringing Christian faith into conversation with some of these scientific issues? Well, let me go back into Durham's history to tell you a little bit about this. And tell you about this person. This is the Reverend Temple Chevalier. Here's his portrait. And he was professor of mathematics at the university from 1835. He was also reader in Hebrew. He was a little disappointed that he wasn't professor of Hebrew. And in 1841, he became the first professor of astronomy at the university. He did terrific work on sunspots. He has a crater on the moon named after him. Alongside all of these things, he was registrar of the university, and he was also vicar at Ash Parish Church, where he ministered for nearly 40 years, just on the hills outside Durham. He was also rural dean, and he was also residentiary canon at the university. He had a busy lifestyle. Temple Chevalier was a wonderful astronomer, but also theologian. And in the university library, we have these lectures, which he gave at Cambridge, called the Halcyon Lectures, entitled On the Proofs of Divine Power and Wisdom Derived from the Study of Astronomy and Evidence, Doctrines and Precepts of Revealed Religion. I think the word proof here is a slightly misleading, because Temple Chevalier doesn't try and prove God through this. Let me tell you what he does. He has 20 lectures to give in this series. And the first 4 lectures, he bases and models on Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. And what he does is he takes his astronomy and he goes, let me show you this. Wow, gosh, isn't this amazing? Isn't this terrific? Isn't this awe-inspiring? Isn't this exciting? I might not fully understand this, but this is what science has done. Isn't this great? The heavens declare the glory of God. But he doesn't leave it there, because his next 4 lectures pick up verses 7 to 10, where he talks about the word of the Lord. The law of the Lord is perfect. He devotes these lectures to the importance of the Bible, that the God of creation has become a human being in Jesus, lived amongst us, died on the cross, been raised from the dead. And it's that knowledge of God that he sees in Jesus that provides the anchor for him to, with joy, see awe at the universe. And then in the next few lectures, he picks up the rest of the psalm talking about Christian lifestyle. That all brings with it responsibility, that encountering God in Jesus brings with it the invitation to Christian discipleship. Truth be told, he's then got 8 other lectures to give, and he does what many other lecturers do. He picks out all of his old sermons and other things that he's can't find another place for, and he crams them in to the rest of the lecture series and don't quite fit. I find this a really helpful model for encountering awe at the universe. Let's together show joy with those people of faith and not, to say, wow, gosh, isn't this amazing? The Christian then says, may I offer you the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, where I believe that this creator God has graciously revealed God's self in a way that we can understand, not to tell us everything about everything, but to tell us something about something. And the invitation is not to simply go, gosh, wow, but the invitation then is to live responsibly in the light of a God who is an extravagant creator, for us to value the diversity and extravagance of creation. I think that's enough for me. It's been good to share with you. Bye-bye.